past. I simply could not figure out what Paul was referring to when he talked about being under the law, and neither did I have a clue as to what he meant by the term works of the law. Be that as it may, I continued to lecture and to teach on what I did understand about Paul, Yeshua, the New Testament, and the written Torah. I knew that it was necessary for people who believed in the teachings of Yeshua to also observe those parts of the 613 commandments that applied to them. However, as for the letter called Galatians, it remained a confusing epistle to me. Nonetheless, from time to time, I still tried to pick it up and read it, only to put it down again for a while and not think too much about it. But all too often, people would approach me on the subject of Galatians and ask me what this word or that statement meant, and I just could not answer with confidence. After all, many in the mid-1990s had been coming to a personal realization that the law had not been done away with, and Paul's letter to the Galatians proved to be a formidable obstacle to overcome, as so many were being confronted by family and friends. So this forced me to try to understand the mind of Paul as expressed in Galatians, when in fact I would rather have just left it alone and not have had to think about it longer than I needed to. Realizing this, that a growing number of people were committing themselves to observing more and more of the written commandments of the Hebrew Torah, these were also facing a barrage of accusations and did not know how to answer them from Galatians, the Magna Carta of the Christian faith. I tried to offer some support to as many as I could, but in trying to help bring answers to outside challenges on Galatians, I too found myself with empty responses that could be considered strained at best. I recall the retorts of my challengers well. Avi, you have fallen from grace. Haven't you read Galatians? You are freed from the law. You had better be careful because you are going to lose your salvation. You cannot earn your salvation by works. The Jews were saved by keeping the law, and we are saved by grace. Paul said that if we do the works of the law, then we make void everything that Christ did on the cross. Over and over again, the repetition was nauseating, and yet I knew that something was not right in the understanding that most people had of Paul. But at the time, I just did not know how to express it. I knew that Yeshua came to teach the Torah accurately, and that his disciples were in fact very Torah observant, reading it from their own words. However, I must once again admit I was confused by Paul. Some of his statements made sense, others did not. I tried to get a grasp on his communicating style, but his concepts appeared so convoluted that reading his letter only frustrated me further. I simply could not figure him out. As a result, I was of little or no help to anyone out there who might come to me looking for answers to their perplexing questions about Galatians, or really anything written by the man whose letters make up most of what is called the New Testament. It was around the 1997-98 time frame that I began believing in earnest that a legal understanding of Pharisaic oral law might be one of the keys that unlocks Galatians. So I set out on a path to study the Mishnah and the Gemara, the Talmud. However, I did not have any personal experience growing up as an Orthodox Jew or learning in a yeshiva under the wing of a rabbi and community hall. Nor did I have enough Hebrew Aramaic background to really understand everything that was said in the Talmud. But I did my best at self-study, receiving some insights that did answer, at least partially, some of my hardest questions about Galatians. Several years earlier, an article that really got me thinking about Galatians was published in Biblical Archaeology Review. The magazine came out with Paul, Works of the Law, and MMT, by Martin Abegg of Trinity Western University in British Columbia, concerning the Essenes and the Dead Sea Scrolls, also called 4Q MMT, Miksat Maaseh Torah. Certainly he made some excellent points. Together with this concept of the 4Q MMT letter and my own personal studies in the Talmud, I came up with a few postulations. As I shared these new ideas with some of my closest friends, most of their responsive comments were lukewarm at best. Well, maybe, my friends would say. Or I would get lectured with statements like, I don't know, Avi, it's possible, but... Those buts are always bothersome, because it says in one word, I am not convinced, and I think you are stretching your point. Nonetheless, I kept up my studies. Not long after, I met Andrew Gabriel Roth, an intellectual Jew with a strong gift for academics and an interest in Aramaic and its ideas. He had already authored a book on the topic of Aramaic and the New Testament, and I found his work thought-provoking. I turned to Roth and posed some of my conclusions to him about Galatians. Roth responded back to me with further insights that proved I was on the right track of study. Insights that were actually astounding, to say the least. In fact, all of the Aramaic translation work of this Galatians commentary comes from Roth, along with many of his thought-provoking footnotes. Over the years, since meeting Roth and diligently examining the underlying substratum of Aramaic concepts in Galatians, I have continued my studies looking for even more concrete answers to my questions, particularly as it relates to Galatians and the returning house of Israel, something that Yeshua made reference to in Matthew 15:24. More on this subject in the next chapter. In the early months of 2003, while once again reading and studying Galatians, all of a sudden something clicked in my understanding of what Paul meant by some of his cryptic statements, particularly concerning Sarah and Hagar from Galatians 4:21 through 27, the tutor and the law from Galatians 3:23 through 25, and Messiah's redemption from the curse of the law, Galatians 3:10 and 4:1 through 7. In light of the Tanakh prophecies concerning the lost sheep of the house of Israel, Galatians started making a little more sense. So I began firming up my thoughts along with the material that Roth had submitted to me privately. For the first time in my writing and speaking career, I knew that I had something solid on Galatians, and so I began to organize a series of public lectures for delivery in August of 2003. In speaking with some of the people that had heard the lectures, it was told to me that they were well received. In any case, I believed that my lectures still needed some more study and polishing before I could write a book on the subject. Just after the biblical festival of Sukkot in Jerusalem 2003, I was introduced to Nehemiah Gordon in Jerusalem, Israel. Certainly an intellectual character with a sense of humor. The son of an Orthodox rabbi, Gordon grew up as an Orthodox Jew in the United States. Gordon also grew up under the authority of strict rabbinic halakha. He broke away from his life of being locked up under the authority of the Rabbanim because, according to Gordon, the rabbis deliberately changed and continue to change the words of the Holy Torah. For Gordon, this was unacceptable, as he can quote you Dvarim 4:1 through 2 in Hebrew, which says in English, "And now, O Israel, listen to the statutes and the judgments which I am teaching you to perform, in order that you may live and go in and take possession of the land which Jehovah, the Elohim of your fathers, is giving you. You shall not add to the word which I am commanding you, nor take away from it, that you may keep the commandments of Jehovah, your Elohim, which I command you." Nehemiah Gordon is a Karaite. Simply put, a Karaite is one who accepts for divine authority only the written texts of the Torah, the prophets, and the writings, nothing else. For Gordon, there is no rabbinic authority, nor is there a second revelation of oral law given to Moses on Mount Sinai. A new concept for me, considering that I had spent almost a decade pursuing a Jewish lifestyle according to the halakha of the rabbis. Because of Gordon's extensive background growing up according to Jewish orthodoxy, his academic discipline and fluency in Hebrew and Aramaic, his excellent knowledge of Greek, his scholarly understanding of the Dead Sea Scrolls as a researcher on the project at Jerusalem's Hebrew University, and his already established exegesis on Matthew chapter 23 and the seat of Moses in regards to Yeshua and the Pharisees in the category of scholarly textual research, I believed that Nehemiah Gordon was a perfect candidate to help me unravel some additional riddles of what appeared to be complex Pauline theology. I asked him to get involved with me on strictly a textual level and to help me loosen up some of the dried out and crusty fragments of Paul's overbaked theology concerning the law. Gordon accepted the challenge, but personally kept telling me while grinning, "You have your work cut out for you." The material that